Hey everyone, how you doing? Alright, so I think at this point in the history of PVZ, you've probably gotten accustomed to the idea of PopCap deciding to take the franchise in a weird direction multiple times at this point, right? I mean, we had an isometric version of the tower defense games, we have the entire shooter side of the franchise, and heck, we're getting a match 3 game eventually. But I think out of all of these side games, the one that fascinates me the most by far is none other than today's subject, PVZ Heroes. Oh my god, what a fever dream of a game. So, welcome back. This is another entry in my review/retrospective series that covers every game in the international PVZ franchise, to ultimately see if these games were actually good, or if we all just have rose-tinted glasses on. And like I said before, Heroes is our topic for today. And what a game too! Fun fact, excluding PVZ Adventures, this is the game that I've put the least amount of time into by far. Like, by a landslide. A landslide of a few hundred hours. And that's for a good reason that I will explain soon enough. But for now, we'll quickly go over what the categories are for this video, and those are background/story, gameplay, and endgame/conclusion. Yes, we're skipping the extras for this specific game because there is literally nothing extra to discuss. Pretty much everything falls into the core gameplay loop. So with that being said, let's dive into the first section, that being So, when it comes to the background of Heroes and its development, yeah, how did this happen? Seriously. Well, the game itself began development in 2014, which, yes, actually makes it a game with a longer development cycle than Garden Warfare 1, which seemingly only had about a year. Just think about that for a moment, and you'll realize how pretty insane that is. Anyways, the early concept art for the game was pretty interesting, and it looked like it was initially planned to be way closer to Hearthstone than it eventually was. And also yes, that game clearly had a lot of influence on this project, or at the very least, the two games are basically in the same genre. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Now, as for the story in PVZ Heroes, there's actually quite a bit of lore to the game. The background to how the Plant and Zombie Heroes even came to be was due to Zomboss and his machine that turns zombies into heroes, which of course malfunctions on him, which leads to a bunch of Plant and Zombie Heroes. There's also just a lot of stuff shown off here, specifically in this really cool and stylistic comic approach. I may not be the biggest Heroes fan, but I will happily admit that this is awesome. I love how unique it is compared to the other PVZ games. Now, I'm not going to sit here and give you a rundown of what the tea is with the plants and zombies, but with that being said, I think you generally get the idea of what this game is going for. So with that being said, let's dive into the meaty part of the video, which is okay, it's time I talk about my feelings on this game a little bit, and I believe that this is pretty important for you guys to know before anything else. I don't like this genre of gaming. At all. In fact, I kind of despise it. So let me make something very clear before I even begin discussing this game. And that is the fact that I have a bias. I always will. I do not like games like these. So if I'm harsher in this video compared to say BFN or PVZ2, keep that in mind. I genuinely cannot hide my bias. For reference, I've tried to play this game 5 times across 5 years, and this video is the only reason why I haven't dropped the game past hour 10. So yeah, I'm not a Heroes fan. That also explains why I don't make Heroes content, by the way, so now you know. Anyways, with all that being said, what exactly is the gameplay loop for this game? Well, it's actually not too complicated once you get down to it. Essentially, your goal is to take your opponent's HP down to 0, and you do so by playing plants, zombies, and tricks on the board when your turn is given. So yes, this is turn-based, but it's also a strategy game at its core. Your decisions make a very big impact, and that can lead to butterfly effects that you would have never seen coming sometimes. That's just how the game rolls, and it's best that you accept that bit of RNG before anything else. But how do the rounds usually play out? Well, at the beginning of each game, you're given 4 cards that you can cycle around for something else randomly 1 time each. So if you start with a really bad hand, you could cycle and pray that you get something better. On top of this, you're also given 1 hero ability card to start with too, and these can only be obtained one other way, which we'll get to soon enough. As for your first turn, you and your opponent are given 1 sun or brain to use. And as you can see here, the cycle for each turn is zombie, plant, zombie, then battle. What's up with that? Well, the catch here has to do with tricks. Both sides have playable plants and zombies, as well as trick cards, which are basically used to destroy an opponent's plant or zombie, make an environment that gives special stat bonuses, and much more. Basically, these are cards that trick your opponent, and zombies can only play their trick cards after the plants play. This is because the zombies get the first move, and plants get to see this move and act on it right after. It might seem complex, but basically what you need to know is that the zombies can only play zombie cards on the first move, plants can play both plant and trick cards on the second move, and zombies get to play tricks on the third move. And once the turn ends, the next turn rewards 1 extra sun and brain to the players, and the cycle goes on and on from there. Where things get interesting is with the shield you see here. So whenever a plant or zombie damages a hero, this little bar ticks up randomly between 1, 2, or 3 points. When the bar reaches the maximum points, you defend and attack, and then you're given a free exclusive superpower, which is the only other way to get them besides the beginning of a round. These are actually unique, since they are the only cards that you could play during an attack phase if you're lucky enough to pull one that can be used then. And besides that, this is essentially the core gameplay loop, until somebody loses all of their HP. So that's a lot to process. And believe me, I haven't even started getting into the nuances between all of these things too. If we dive into that, well, that's where things get complex. As an example, let's just look at one hero, Solar Flare. Don't get any funny ideas, PVZ community. So, Solar Flare has 2 types, Kabloom and Solar. Both class types specialize in something, Kabloom being filling the field and buffing, and Solar being sun production and even hero healing. In fact, her signature superpower card shows off a bit of both by allowing her to deal 2 damage to any zombie or even the hero, and it also gives her 1 extra sun every turn for the rest of the game. So essentially, she builds up sun that allows her to get some pretty strong plants on the board sooner than her opponent can. But due to these 2 class types, she has almost no access to incredibly tanky plants, or plants with a ton of synergy, or even amphibious plants in general, which are used for one of the 5 lanes you see here. So overall, her typing gives her some advantages, but it also puts her at a disadvantage for some situations too. And this is something that happens with every hero too. They all have 2 types, and some types are better than others because PopCap is going to be PopCap, and balancing was never a part of the equation. Fun! But ignoring that, how complex can these cards get? Well, let's go through some examples, why don't we? There's a lot of special types, and like I had mentioned before, there's stuff like Amphibious, which allows a card to be placed on both land and water, Armored, which gives immunity to attacks that deal 1 damage, and gives a card with it 1 extra resistance to cards that deal more than that, Hunt, which moves the card with it to a lane that has an enemy card in it, and there's even crazy stuff like Untrickable, which makes a card invulnerable to any tricks that the opposing side has. And as for the side-specific traits, on plants there's stuff like Double Strike, which lets a plant attack twice provided they survive the initial attack, and for zombies there's stuff like Gravestone, which hides a zombie so that the plant player can't see it during their planning phase. Oh, and just to make things even more chaotic, almost any trait can mix together with another, get added onto cards that don't normally have it, and even be removed, and the damage and HP of said cards gets affected by certain things too. Do you see how complex this can actually get? Like, there is so much to this game that frankly, me even trying to make sense of it would be nothing short of slightly embarrassing. This is one of those games where you're better off learning about it by yourself, compared to some person on the internet telling you what they think about it. But with that being said, that is just one side of Heroes. What about the actual content in the game, such as what you can actually do? Well, this is kind of where a lot of the game falls flat in my book. There's 2 campaigns that you can play, and each of them have 200 missions to sit through. So, no thank you, I can't be bothered. And besides that, there's daily challenges, sometimes event matches that force you to use specific decks, and online battles, which are both ranked and unranked. And that's it. Mostly. There's still one more thing to go over, which is how you get the cards. Oh boy. Okay, let's not sugarcoat things here. This game is heavy on the pay-to-win aspect. Like, really heavy. To explain what I mean, you can get things by playing the game normally, but it's at such a slow pace that frankly, it feels more like a grind fest than a fun incentive. And on top of that, there's some really good cards that are locked behind card packs that you can buy with the in-game gem currency, or real money. So yeah, this game has a very big issue with microtransactions, and out of every game in the franchise, I think this one is the worst by far, because multiplayer is kind of like the entire endgame here. Like, look at this match. I have almost no rare cards in my deck, and look at my opponent's side. This was a sweep before things even began, come on now. but I can explain my thoughts further in the final section, which is... So, you want to complete Heroes? Well, yeah, it's possible. You just need to play through 400 matches of the campaigns. And let's be real here, most of you do not care enough to do that. But if you do, you get rewarded with nothing. Oh my god, why would there not be an incentive for completing the campaigns? You've got to be kidding me, PopCap. Now, there is a couple of other goals, one of which being getting the top of the league and ranked, but this one boils down to blood, sweat, and tears being put into the game. And this system is grindy. I've talked with a few people who've played it quite a bit, and it seems like they all agree that it's just a grind fest. And that's without even mentioning the meta and all of that jazz that I simply do not understand, and could never understand to be honest. You can also try to collect every card in the game, which, I mean, yeah, I think that's possible. It actually might not be due to some exclusivity, but whatever, you could still try. So yeah, overall the endgame is pretty minimal, and that puts the Heroes community in a weird position, as the biggest YouTubers of the game pretty much just play ranked. At least for the tower defense games and the shooter games, there's a lot of unique stuff that you could cook up. But here, highlights mostly. And trust me, there's nothing wrong with that, I think it's fine. I suppose this is just me kinda feeling a bit lost on the idea of what makes the game appealing in the first place. And that starts my conclusion on the game itself. And like I said before, I don't like it. I'm just not a fan of Heroes. And it's not like PopCap themselves made a bad game or anything like that. This is made really well, and honestly, compared to modern PVZ 2, this game holds up really well, despite PopCap basically abandoning it. But that doesn't overall change my opinion on the game, and I'm just not the audience for it. I have nothing but admiration for Heroes because it has such a dedicated community, and I will always respect the game. But I'm not somebody who's going to lie to you in an honest review, so I'll say it again. I don't like PVZ Heroes, but that doesn't mean that the game is bad. It's just not for me. And with that being said, I'll be ending this video here. Thank you all so much for watching until the end, I really do appreciate it. If I'm going to be completely honest, the actual reason why this video took me so long to make compared to all of the other reviews so far had nothing to do with actual time. No, I just didn't want to play Heroes. Sorry to say, but again, I don't like the game, and the review didn't change my thoughts on it one bit. I was hoping it would, but nope, I still don't like the game. But with that being said, that's just my thoughts on the game. I still want to hear what you think in the comments down below. I love to look at your comments. Also, I just want to give a quick shout out to Gravitry, Aldenity for Omens, and Wafa for being $5 supporters of my channel. All of you rock, thank you so much. And if you're new around here, and you like what you saw, then maybe consider subscribing too. It helps me out a ton, and you get to see more PVZ content in the future. Win-win, but it's not going to be Heroes. Now, as for me, I have one final spicy retrospective video to make, so I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.